So we're going to have a little look at version 3. Now this is the one that's got the lined top pocket. Now your exterior panels are slightly different shape for this one. They've got this angled part on the top. Your card slots are exactly the same, and you have your two lining panels. Now I've already gone ahead and top stitched along the top of my card slots, just because you've already seen that twice, so you don't really need to see it again. So I'm going to insert the pocket lining. So with my exterior piece right side up and those angled edges at the top, this is the top, I'm going to take my lining panel and I'm going to right sides together across the top there. So actually now I can't see those angles. So when you look at the pattern and you think, oh, there's no angles on that, it's because they're underneath. You can see there that they're actually underneath. And I wanted the diagrams on the pattern to reflect what you actually see as you're stitching. So I'm just going to pop that on there. I'm going to do exactly the same with the other exterior panel. So I'm matching it up. Make sure that the sides of your lining match the sides of your exterior panel, and that the top edge matches perfectly. I'm just going to pop in a couple of clips to keep it secure. So those are right sides together. So this is the right side of my lining and the right side of my faux leather. And I'm going to stitch across there, top of this panel, using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is the only time we're using anything other than an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance when we add our linings. Actually, I don't think that's true. I think we actually use a 1/4 inch seam allowance when we stitch around the outside of the lining. So forget I said that. I'm not thinking ahead of myself, and I should be. So I'm going to do the other one exactly the same. It's easier to do them together than it is to try and do them apart. So 3/8 of an inch or 10 millimeters if you're a metric. A couple of back stitches at each end just to secure your threads, and then we turn it over so we have the back of the faux leather showing, and I'm just going to trim down that faux leather down to about 1/8 of an inch from the seam allowance. So now you can see the lining fabric poking out at the top there. And we do this to kind of remove the bulk in the top. It gets a bit bulky if we're not careful. And this is only a little wallet. We don't want it to be hugely bulky. So I'm going to take my two panels and I'm going to use my fingers, and I'm just going to finger press that lining away from the exterior panel. And I'm going to then fold it over. Now, if you've got a metal roller, you can use that to sort of press across the top of here. Obviously, it's made of faux leather, so you can't get your iron to it, or you shouldn't get your iron to it. You can press faux leather, but not in this instance. It's not worth it. What you need to do is make sure that your, excuse me, goodbye, Fred. Yeah, okay, see you later, love. Grandson's here, not feeling very well. Make sure that your lining panel is right behind your exterior panel, and then we're going to top stitch across there, starting 1/4 inch in from the outside edge. So we're not stitching right from, thank you, not stitching right from the edge. We're starting 1/4 inch in. My apologies. This is a real house with real sewing, with a husband working from home and a grandson who's been sent home from school because he didn't feel well, and just stuff, you know, normal stuff. And I tell them I'm doing a video, and do they listen? No. So I do apologise, but with the exception of my husband, who is now left in the house, we are now alone, so hopefully that won't happen again. Unless, of course, the phone rings, which it does sometimes. So I've started, let's just get rid of those threads off the back there. So I started by stitching 1/4 inch from this side, and I've finished 1/4 inch from this side. And from the front there, you can see none of the lining fabric. If you look at the top, you can see that that seam where I've joined the two is sitting perfectly on the top there. I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the second exterior panel. So I'm just finger pressing first and then folding it. I'm a great one for not using clips if I don't need to, but in this instance, if you let the lining fabric kind of peer out, it just looks untidy. So it needs to be, the lining fabric needs to be right behind the exterior fabric. And again, we're starting 1/4 inch in, and no, I don't measure 1/4 inch, I eyeball it. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and remove any threads. And now we go back to a very similar construction to the previous one, but what we've got to do is we've got to pull this lining panel out. We don't want to be sticking our card slots where and sewing through the lining as well. So I pull the lining out from behind the panel. And in the same way as we did before, my back card slot goes on 3/4 inch from the bottom edge. So you can either draw the line, or you can do as I've done, and you can kind of use your ruler and butt the card slot up against the ruler. Make sure that the side tabs are matched exactly. And then stitch across the bottom of that back card slot using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to put the next one on, and it's going to be, this one's not a very good ruler for this. It's going to be a 1/4 inch away from the bottom edge, and again I'm just using the ruler and butting the card slot up against the ruler that's been positioned in the right place. Taking my clips just to make sure that everything's secure, and again I'm going to stitch along the bottom of that card slot using an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now you can see that a lot of this repeats itself from one version to another, but there we have the two back and the centre card slots on. Now we're going to join these lining pieces. So we're going to take the back piece with the lining and the front piece with the lining. So we have these two panels, one's got card slots on, one hasn't, and I'm going to lay them right sides together, but I'm laying the linings right sides together and matching the top corners of the lining. The rest, if it's all done properly, should just hang there, and it should all be together as long as you've measured accurately. You need to make sure that the tops of your exterior panels sit nicely together there. So I like to just clip them just to make sure that everything is where it needs to be. And you can see that those linings fit perfectly together. And what we're going to do is, starting 1/4 inch from this seam line, we're going to stitch down, along and back up again to 1/4 inch point on the other side. So just kind of flatten it down with your finger. And we're going to stitch around the linings at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I don't interface these linings, they're very small pieces, and I'm also conscious of the fact that we don't really want to bulk it out any more than we need to. So I didn't add any interfacing to this part of the lining. However, you'll find with version 4 I've added interfacing to the back lining panel, And that's because if it stretches, nothing fits. So you want to stabilize it very, very, you know, it just takes a little tiny bit of stabilizing just to make sure that nothing stretches. So there we are. So I've started a quarter inch away from that seam that's going across. I've come down and around. Now I'm going to trim out my seam allowance, being really careful not to cut your faux leather. And you can see I've kind of curved inwards. Now if you want to take these corners off, you can do. Excuse me. Let's just do the same on the other side. What you're not doing is trimming away any of the faux leather. It's just the fabric you're trimming out of the seam allowance. Now at this point where you've got the join between the exterior and the lining, make sure that you trim that little 1/8 of an inch sort of edge bit off of the cotton lining fabric. Just go as close as you can. You don't need to trim the bottom, just the sides need to come in just a little bit. And you've used a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so if you take 1/8 of an inch off and that leaves you 1/8 of an inch, everything will be fine. So we then open up the two exterior pieces and lay them wrong sides together, and our lining panels are sitting centrally, so we're fully enclosing the lining panels. And I'm just going to pop a few clips in to hold those absolutely in place. You need the two top corners to match perfectly on both sides, and they should do. If you've cut it accurately, they should do. The bottom also matches. Now we're going to take that final card slot, and on the front where you've already got your card slots, we're going to lay that on top, matching up the bottom corners. I think it's fairly clear to anybody that's watched all of the videos now that it's fairly simple to do, and it's quite repetitive, and there's not a lot of change from one version to another. They're just slight changes. So once you've done one and you understand how it's constructed, you can just go off and make hundreds of them, really. They're very, very addictive, I promise you. So let's just match up these corners as well. And because we've got a pocket in the top that's lined, we are only going to stitch down and along and up again. So we're not going to be stitching across the top because we've got that pocket which we need to keep open to put our big wads of money in. So let's just get my bottom thread out. So again, I'm going to use my awl. Let me just move the camera up a little bit. I'm going to use my awl to hold everything in place. I'm going to start right on that top corner. So rather than having my fingers right underneath the presser foot, again, I've got my awl there, which holds all of the layers together. as I come to them so I can stitch them. Also allows me, if I need to just kind of pull them slightly if I've had a bit of stretch, and it does happen. I can use the awl to kind of stretch things back where they need to be. Take it slowly. It's really important that you take it nice and slowly. This stitching is fully visible from the front and the back, and it will look a dog's dinner if you don't take it slowly. You must make sure that you stick to an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, because if you don't, you won't get your cards in. This is as small as a card wallet can probably be, simply because I have a skip stitch there, so I'm just going to gone back over that. I'm not quite sure why it skipped, because that's actually the thinnest part. Oh, very strange. It appears to be. I'm not sure it's a skip stitch or if it's just picked up a bit of thread from somewhere. Who knows? But it's fixed. It's all sorted. So there we have version 3. So we have 3 card slots for your cards, and then I don't appear to have any paper money here, but you then have a pocket at the top to pop your you could pop another card in it actually if you wanted to, so you could use 4 cards, or you can pop a note of some sort in the top, or ID, or your COVID card, or whatever it is that you want to carry, your bus pass, your library card. There we go, version 3 with a fully lined top pocket. Fab, isn't it? I love it.